You're trying to get me to say something that I'm not going to go over that line. I can only say what I saw there was somebody who claimed to be interacting with something. Do I think it's possible? Ah, there's no reason to expect that anything that they were doing was a lie or put on for show.
Stanford professor Dr. Garry Nolan recently made some comments on a News Nation interview hosted by Ross Coulthart. Now, let's get into a few of these highlights. This first clip is Dr. Garry Nolan talking about, essentially, a lot of times it's assumed that when someone comes in with injuries that they purport to have had, gained from an encounter with the UFO, right? And they go to Dr. Garry Nolan. Can he prove that, that it happened because directly of the UFO?
UAPs, perhaps non-human technology of some kind, have they caused injuries, or is there merely a correlation of injuries that you've seen?
I've seen, unfortunately, no direct causation. I've seen situations where people have come to me and said the following occurred, and here are the medical events that I didn't have prior to this occurrence. So all I have are stories that other people come to me with that are what you would call secondhand stories. But I have seen the damage, and I can't explain what it is that the damage, what would have actually caused such damage, absent some kind of radiation.
All right, so this next clip is going to show Dr. Garry Nolan responding to a question about psionic abilities, right? This ability to telepathically control, communicate, even move objects, that moves into telekinesis. But regardless, it's all sort of, right, this psionic ability that potentially people have. And in this case, it's Dr. Garry Nolan going to, with Jake Barber and his team, out to a field to sort of demonstrate this capability. And then Dr. Garry Nolan was there, and this is sort of his response to that to some extent. I've got more on that in another clip too, so bear with me. But check this one out first.
So, Professor, on the evidence you've seen, do you find it plausible that the US government is using psionic psychic operators to attract UAP NHI craft?
I can only say what I saw there was somebody who claimed to be interacting with something. Do I think it's possible? We're already working in the world of the Elon Musks, who are putting devices into people's brains to be able to talk directly to brains. I have no problem imagining a technology 1,000 years from now where even humans can interact with each other in some sort of pseudo-psionic manner. I don't know what it is that might be required to interact with a non-human intelligence. But what I can say is that the area within which we were working was absent of any possible overfly from commercial jets, because it was a mandated area where nothing such could occur. So what it was that we saw wasn't a flyover. It certainly wasn't a bug. So we can get rid of all of those opportunities. But the fact that the group with whom we were working were able to openly operate in this area, because they had openly operated in this kind of area before, and knew how to do it, tells me that there's a process in place for individuals of this type to access, where they're freely allowed to do what they're doing.
All right, so in this next clip, Dr. Garry Nolan gets a little, squirmy, not squirmy, but, kind of thinking like Ross wants a particular answer out of him, right, that he's kind of doesn't want to cross the line and go into, which is essentially Ross is asking him, tell me what you think you know about, non-human intelligence interacting on this planet, essentially, right? And Garry just kind of, well, I got my response, my experience versus what's provable versus, anyway, here's Garry's answer to that question.
Can I get a definitive statement from you, Garry, on what you think you know about the existence of a non-human intelligence engaging with this planet?
My personal experience, both with people and the things that I've seen, is that there's something here. My problem is, again, as a scientist, that's my set of anecdotes. I need to get it into a form that I can hand to another scientist who sits in the office next to me and said, here's the data that you can use. There's so much data out there already that it's how do I compile a minimum list so that I can get a colleague's attention for the 5 minutes required to get them to say either it should be something that they follow up on or they can still go back to their day job. You're trying to get me to say something that I'm not going to go over that line, because if I don't maintain a certain level of skepticism, I just lose the credibility that I require for my scientific colleagues to feel that I'm a neutral observer.
All right, so this next clip is the longest clip that I have for you here, and it's Dr. Garry Nolan responding to, honestly, a very long question from Ross. He's trying to fit a lot in at this moment, which I get. But essentially, when you hear it, you'll understand what I mean, what I'm about to say. It essentially comes down to, right, there is allegedly a non-human intelligence, right, aliens, right, interacting with this planet, and versus the American government's official position that there is no evidence that fact exists, right? So, and that dichotomy, right? Why is the government saying there's nothing to see here, there are no aliens interacting with Earth, versus what Dr. Garry Nolan knows, and these whistleblowers like Jake Barber who are coming forward and other people who have testified in the past, right? All allegedly, right? I'll say to all of this, right? The evidence has yet to come out, right? So again, we're still at story time for a lot of this, but regardless, right? Dr. Garry Nolan responding to this is interesting, right? So take a look.
Professor, I appreciate you are a top-level international scientist, and you understandably will be skeptical and guarded in what you're prepared to say. But I've interviewed you previously, and you've been very forthcoming about your belief that, or your knowledge, that there is indeed a non-human intelligence engaging with this planet. About here, though, from Jake Barber and his colleagues is on another level entirely. For the first time, first-hand witnesses to what we say is a retrieval program involving a non-human intelligence technology. Tell me what you think about the credibility of these witnesses, and what are your impressions about the whole idea of a non-human intelligence engaging with this planet, when we still are in a situation where the military, the Pentagon, is flatly asserting that there is no evidence of any kind of extraterrestrial intelligence engaging with this planet?
So everybody that I've interacted with around this particular incident has been, they're either the best actors in the world and are all deserving of an Oscar next year, or what they're telling me is the truth. I'm a good read of body language and personalities, and what I saw, the way in which they acted, they didn't just act as people as a part in a play. They acted in a way that showed that they'd done this before. And so that told me that they knew what they were doing. They weren't doing this for the first time. You know, they don't bring a Stanford professor to a secure site to witness this, so that there wasn't all of this effort put into it just for me. I was just there for observation. There's no reason to expect that anything that they were doing was a lie or put on for show. It just lends further support to things that I've already said before, that the chance that all of this is by chance or is just a whole bunch of mistakes is diminishingly small. It's to the point now where it's up to the true skeptics to come forward and say, what are the standards that you're going to require for there to be proof? Does an alien or an extraterrestrial or a non-human intelligence have to walk out on stage and shake your hands? Is that your standard of proof? Or is your standard of proof that of a scientist, which says, I see preliminary data here, and something which is even more than preliminary data, that says, hey, it's time to put together a public response and a public program that allows the public to know what the data is, rather than putting all the money into things that are going on clearly behind the scenes that you're just going to basically black out when any reports are being provided. I think those days are over.
All right, hope you enjoyed today's video. Please make sure to leave your comments down below. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. New videos every day. All right, y'all. We'll see you on the next one. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace!
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.